Hello and welcome to Notcast 229. Today is Tuesday, 30th of August, 2022. Today I am going to be talking about an album that really made a huge difference to who I was when I first heard it in 1987. It is the first or third studio album, depending on your point of view, by the band The, and it is called Soul Mining. Here is the original LP. That's Canadian CD, cassette, lots of different formats of the record, which I'm going to talk through, and lots of 7-inch singles actually as well. This was a super busy time for the band. Although to call them a band, I think, is to overstate what the were stroke are is really the is the name for the creative output of Matt Johnson. He obviously had done the solo album Burning Blue Soul under the name Matt Johnson, which was later retrospectively turned into a The album. He'd also done the cassette album Spirits, which hardly anybody has ever heard, and the cassette album See Without Being Seen. That alongside a whole bunch of earlier singles, all of which were the focus of an earlier episode of this. Instead, today, this is the band's first album released under the moniker. The first one was signed to Epic Records. To all intents and purposes, the debut album, Soul Mining, which was released in, I think, late 1983 when I was 10 years old. And obviously it passed me by at the time it came out because I was 10 years old. To me, 1983 was the summer of Return of the Jedi and not very much else, really. Ewoks and Death Stars and Darth Vader. It was also the summer where I first became aware of, I think, politics and the state of the world around me, which I became quite keenly aware of. So some of my early memories about the state of the world was the news, and the news had the Falklands War on it. It had boats exploding, it had Harrier jumjets, it had our brave soldiers defeating the evil Argies that had come to take in a tiny little island thousands of miles away off our precious little empire. We had Margaret Thatcher. We had the threat of the nuclear explosion and the 4-minute warning and the death of all mankind in a nuclear winter, later glamorized. I think glamorized maybe isn't the word in the film Threads. We had nuclear apocalypse breathing down our shoulders, and just coming up not long after the Soul Mining came out, we had the miners' strikes, which I remember very vividly walking down Cottridge High Street in Birmingham. That's where I grew up, Cottridge and Bourneville. Sorry, cats down there. And seeing a table where you were able to donate groceries that were then given to the striking miners. The miners were striking for the rights for their workplaces not to be shut down. And I mean, certainly this was a thing that was a cause of great social concern when I was younger. The idea was that you would have a job for life. You would go into the job and that would be your job for life, as long as you didn't screw up. And the concept behind that was that if you were safe and secure, that was part of the bargain. So there was a social contract around employment, which is, you might not earn a huge amount of money, but you've got a final salary pension and you've got a job for life. And over time, that started to unravel and disconnect. Sorry, I'm being heckled by a small black beastie who wants to come. Do you want to come and have a look? Yep. Hello. So this is my little dude who's 2 years old now. I absolutely love him to bits. He doesn't like being held like that. He likes rummaging around in little corners. So in 1983, 1984, my experience of the workplace was that there was a job for life, a social contract, that there would be a final salary pension, that your employer would look after you, and you would do the work. And that was a fair bargain, is that you would sell your time and your money and your labour, and in exchange you would be treated with respect and dignity by your employer, who would obviously generate profits, and profits are nothing but actually, the gap between the cost of labour and production versus the amount of money that it's able to sell it for. And somehow that all kind of works out. But it unravelled, certainly in places like Wales, for example. The coal mining refineries were the major industrial employer in the area. If you didn't work for them, you worked in a shop, and 95% of your customers worked at the coal mine. Same kind of thing happened in Birmingham. There were 4 major employers. There was the car factory, the HP Sauce factory, There was the Chocolate Factory. That was pretty much it in terms of people that employed you in that town. If you didn't work for them, you didn't really work for anybody. And you know, the HP sauce factory's closed, the chocolate factory is mostly automated, the car factory closed and was turned into flats sometime in the 90s, I think. If you want to kind of think about it, you know, there were people that I went to school with who left school and they got a job. And one of the first things they did, they earned £125 a week. One of the first things that they did was they bought a car, and then they got the car tricked out in the livery for the cover of a The album, which I thought was pretty damn cool. Slightly weird, but pretty damn cool. And £125 a week. How could you spend that much money? Ridiculous. You run out of things to buy. You know, a house cost £22,000 or £30,000 at that point. The whole nature of the economy was very strange and very weird. So we were living under the shadow of war and explosion and social upheaval. And at the same point, you know, we were living in what I felt to be a very unusual world. I didn't really understand why people were voting Conservative in 1983. I thought Margaret Thatcher was an awful woman. I still do. And I didn't understand why people voted for them in 1987 or in 1992. I don't understand why people vote for the Conservatives now. But that's a completely different conversation. However, that is the same kind of sense of social pressures, which I think we're probably experiencing at the moment. And in the midst of all that came the debut record, Soul Mining. Here is the UK version of it that was released in 1983 on CBS Records. This is the second pressing of the album. The reason being is that the first version had a 12-inch single with 3 bonus tracks on. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the period that runs up to this record and what happened immediately after. So Matt Johnson was signed on the basis of a demo that he made. He effectively re-recorded "Cold Spell Ahead," that early single, which I have here on the. Oh no, I don't actually. It's in my other pile of stuff. But "Cold Spell Ahead," the 7-inch single backed with "Hot Ice" that I mentioned in the previous episode, was re-recorded, rearranged, and it was used as a demo with money that was paid for by London Records. And record companies were starting to sniff around Matt Johnson, thinking this guy might have a melodic talent, he might have an artistic vision. This might be somebody that we want to sign, and was signed by CBS in the end for £80,000, which obviously is an advance upon royalties, but was a significant amount of money, and inflation adjusted, that's probably something like £250,000 now. And that was at the age of 21, 22. So often what happens is if you're that age and you suddenly get given as Guns N' Roses said, $1 million that somebody forgot, the temptation is to give in completely and to not actually produce anything. But what Matt did was he went into the studio and he started writing songs. So he created his own little studio in his flat in Highgate. He kitted it out with some equipment, which I've written down somewhere, and I can't remember where I've stuck it on this bit of paper, which I'm looking at here frantically. A Fostex 254-track cassette machine, a TR-606 drum machine, and a Yamaha CS01 rhythmic bass. And so that, alongside with the guitar, he was writing songs at a furious pace, and those songs became what was going to be the debut album called Pornography of Despair. Pornography of Despair was never issued. There was no clear demarcation when the recording sessions for Pornography of Despair ended and the sessions for Soul Mining began. The album effectively turned into Soul Mining, and the songs which had been written for Pornography of Despair effectively became B-sides to the singles. So, for example, the first single that was released during this period is the song that you will know if you know the at all. Here it is, Uncertain Smile. This is the original 12-inch single from 1982. That's Andy Dog artwork, by the way. So Andy Dog being Matt Johnson's brother, my partner, frequently goes, this band have such threatening artwork. They're alongside the Twilight Sound, the two bands whose artwork that they find perhaps the most threatening out of any of them. So Uncertain Smile got a release as a 7-inch and a 12-inch. That was the dominant formats of the time. the word cassette single hadn't yet been invented. I need to Google what the world's first cassette single is. But what you had is actually different tracks on the 7-inch and the 12-inch. So the 7-inch here features the first recording of Uncertain Smile. It was released in 1983 on Cherry Red as a 7-inch, although somewhat oddly, the 12-inch came first, which is bizarre. So the 12-inch here features a long version of Uncertain Smile, recorded in New York, and with all instruments, percussions and voices by Matt Johnson, except for, I think, a clarinet solo, I think, is on this. This is one of the first pressings, which is on a beautiful yellow transparent vinyl. This was the stuff of dreams when I was younger. So when I was younger, this is why I've chosen the T-shirt, by the way, because I haven't got any of the other T-shirts from 1983. But this is why I've chosen the T-shirt. This was the stuff of dreams, because when I was younger, I had a copy of the Infected 1979 to 1987 songbook, and in that songbook listed all the songs by that had been written and recorded. There were these songs like Three Orange Kisses from Kazan and Waiting for the Upturn and Absolute Liberation, songs whose lyrics I read in the book, but I couldn't find the singles. It was very, very difficult to find the singles, and a second-hand copy of this in 1987 would have been £20 or £30, which, considering my pocket money was £6 a week, I just couldn't live with 5 weeks pocket money just for 2 songs. I just couldn't do it. I had too much life and not enough money. Oddly enough, the case of most people's lives now. And so the alternate version, I only knew the songs that were on the Soul Mining album and the bonus tracks that were on the Soul Mining cassette. The bonus tracks on the Soul Mining cassette, by the way, include the 2 B-sides, Three Orange Kisses from Kazan and Waiting for the Upturn, that are on this single. But the version of Uncertain Smile, it was 1998, 1999 before I actually heard the 12-inch version of Uncertain Smile. I downloaded it off Soulseek or LimeWire or Napster or something like that, where somebody had done a vinyl rip at a staggering 128k of MP3. So actually, the fact that later on in my life I was able to get a copy of this, I think I bought this during lockdown. Is I was like, during lockdown, one of my thoughts was, firstly, what I want to do is a Notcast on YouTube, which only about 4 people watch. Hello, John and Alan and everyone else that watches this. But also, what I wanted to do was I wanted to get all the things that I'd wanted all my life. I'd wanted a copy of this, and a copy of this came up that was affordable. It was about £10, and I was like, at last, I'm going to get this. So, behold the behemoth that is the Uncertain Smile 12-inch single. It's pretty nice, actually. Played it yesterday afternoon, sitting in the garden. But the Uncertain Smile, it's effectively Uncertain Smile, is a re-recorded, rewritten version of Cold Spell Ahead with a different ending and a clarinet solo. And the 2 B-side tracks, which later appeared on obviously the Soul Mining cassette, were previews of the unreleased album Pornography of Despair that never came out. And it still isn't issued. I'd love a copy of it on CD, but what these are the re-recordings of the songs that were going to appear on Pornography of Despair and used as B-sides for this 12-inch single. Three Orange Kisses from Kazan and Waiting for the Upturn, by the way, they're really good songs. They are clearly evolutionary steps beyond the Burning Blue Soul album, again heavily influenced by people like Roxy Erickson and Syd Barrett and all that type of stuff, with an unusual approach towards things like melody and lyrics and that kind of slightly wonky angle of looking at the world, which is maybe 23 degrees off the way everybody else looks at reality. And what is art if it isn't a way of showing you the world in a way in which you've never seen it before? I don't know. Uncertain Smile, by the way, is a song which they have played every gig. I've seen them out. I saw them twice on the Comeback Tour in 2018. I think I saw 6 shows on the Naked Self Tour in the year 2000. When I get to talking about Naked Self, I'll probably talk about those shows in more detail. But again, not great shows, but played at every show that I've seen them at. There was a 7-inch of Soul Mining. This was issued on CBS Records much later. That were backed with the title track for the album Soul Mining, which I don't think I think is the same version as the LP version of Uncertain Smile. So yeah, Uncertain Smile definitely got a second bite of the cherry there. And the second single that was released from the album, before the album was even an album, it was just a single by the band The. This is one of the songs which I think people love about The is Perfect. And again, this was another one of my holy grails when I was growing up. I was like, I'll never get to own a copy of Perfect by The. Well, luckily, things have changed a little over time. But my friend Mark had copies of these. He paid a lot of money for them. And I was like, I want it. I want the thing. Kind of like, if you think about, like one of the episode of The Simpsons where Milhouse and Bart kind of club together and they buy a copy of Atomic Man #1. Or is it Radioactive Man #1? Who knows? Or no, is it Atomic Dude? But they buy the issue #1 and they share it together. To me, having a copy of this, it was like, this would get me laid. Clearly it didn't. But it was like, this was a thing that could prove that I really was starting to become who I always wanted to be. And that was a guy with a great record collection. So the 7-inch of Perfect, the version of Perfect that's on the 7-inch and that's on the 12-inch here is a non-album recording of Perfect, which was produced by, well, actually, let's check. It was produced by Mike Thorne, much like Uncertain Smile, and remixed by Phil Hardiman and Matt Johnson on the 12-inch, with harmonica by David Johansen. David Johansen being the guy from the New York Dolls. And the 7-inch, by the way, is much the same, except edited and cut down. So the version of Perfect that's on there is about 9 minutes on the 12-inch, about 4.5 on this. And it's backed with a track called Nature of Virtue, and there are 2 recordings of Nature of Virtue. This version here was produced by Matt Johnson and recorded at The Point, which is not the place in Dublin where I've seen U2. This version of Nature of Virtue on the 12-inch was recorded and mixed at Media Sound, Adivision and Psalm, produced by Mike Thorne. So this is actually the second recording of Nature of Virtue. It is on the 12-inch. The first version is on here. Amongst all the B-sides from this period, there are about 10 non-album tracks which were released on the various singles. I've already shown you 3 of them, by the way. There was an extra one which was called Dumb as Death's Head. That was on a flexi-disc single that was with on the front of Melody Maker. According to this one, it doesn't tell you which episode or which publication of it. I picked up a copy of this from the fantastic monorail in Glasgow in April this year for £1.50. I'm like, I've always wanted a copy of Dumb as Death's Head. Well, here's the 7-inch on a flexi disc. And before I had that, the only place I owned Dumb as Death's Head was on this bootleg unofficial repressing reissue of the controversial Subject 7-inch, the very first the single. So that's the 4th track, which probably would have been on Pornography of Despair, but it was a flexi disc with Melody Maker, one of the greatest of music papers, actually. And then there was a 3rd single that came out, and the 3rd single, which came out, is one that you will know. This Is the Day. This one had 4 different B-sides on. So if we're keeping track, all of the songs which were going to be on Pornography of Despair, near enough, were re-recorded, reutilised and reused as B-sides for the soul mining era. This is the double pack 7-inch. I got this last year. I've always wanted a copy of this, and I managed to pick one up for about £24. It's a lot of money, but it's got 3 of the songs which have not been issued on CD or have been deleted for long over 30 years, and frankly I wanted to treat myself. So the double pack 7-inch of This Is the Day is a pivotal moment in the band's career. First and foremost, it's the first time that the logo appears on anything. This is the logo that the band have used on near enough every release ever since. It's also the first release which is on I think, no, it isn't. It's on Some Bizarre. It's also on CBS. So this is the first one that I think is on CBS. And it's backed with a track called Mental Healing Process. which again has only been issued on CD once on a CD single. The CD single being Armageddon Days Here Again from 1989. And there are two songs which were only ever on the second single of the double pack 7-inch. And those songs were Absolute Liberation and Leap Into the Wind. They come in a gatefold sleeve here. This is the day. Photograph taken live at the Marquee. So the band were doing a limited number of shows in and around London, maybe 10, 12 shows. They did a weekly show at the Marquee. They did a show in Islington. And they played songs from Burning Blue Soul, they played songs from Pornography of Despair, they played songs from Soul Mining. They had a fluid lineup, it changed from week to week. They played with the arrangements of the songs and effectively used those live shows as almost a way of demoing the songs in front of an audience. A couple of those shows are circulating as pretty low quality MP3s. One of them features a track called Hit Me Where It Hurts, which hasn't been released yet. But the quality is really shoddy. I tried to listen to it the other day and I'm like, this is really bad. So I'm afraid if you want any great lost the songs, those cassettes are not the place to look. There's a number of unreleased songs that were played live in 1983, and those were songs that were in contention for Soul Mining, Pornography of Despair, and the B-sides. And then we had obviously these two extra songs, Absolute Liberation and Leap Into the Wind. And Absolute Liberation and Leap Into the Wind, as it says here, taken from the unreleased album Pornography of Despair. And as you can see, it's the first release that's on CBS stroke Epic there, even though the labels for the standard regular single tell you that they're on Some Bizarre. And it says it's produced by Paul Hardman and Matt Johnson, which I think is probably not quite the case. These B-sides were re-recordings done pretty quickly of songs that had been originally earmarked for Pornography of Despair. So by the way, we are now up to 7 songs from Pornography of Despair on the various releases of the various singles. This is the day came in a 12-inch form. Here it is. The 12-inch version is a whole 20 seconds longer than the LP mix, by the way, taken from the forthcoming album Soul Mining, and it's backed with what's called a special mix of the track I've Been Waiting for Tomorrow All of My Life, which is about a minute and a half longer. It's just got a percussion solo and some extra sound effects and things on it. If you want, to pick it up, this is probably the least essential of the 12 inches from this period because it doesn't have any previously unreleased songs on it. You'll know the songs from the Soul Mining LP. And so what we have is a number of songs which are effectively almost homeless at this point. There was a 12-inch that was packaged with some singles, I think in 1986. This is the Soul Mining 12-inch that was shrink wrapped to some copies of Sweet Bird of Truth, I think. And it's also got on it the Sinking Feeling, the original version recorded by Matt Johnson as a demo, and that is taken from the Pornography of Despair album. And the Sinking Feeling is the only song from Pornography of Despair that kind of survived through to Soul Mining. Everything else, Absolute Liberation, Mental Healing Process, Leap Into the Wind, Dumb as Death's Head, 3 Orange Kisses from Kazan, The Nature of Virtue, Fruit of the Heart, Soup of Mixed Emotions. Those were songs that came out elsewhere but were B-sides. So there you have it. And so my running order, by the way, for Pornography of Despair, which is taken from the existing and circulating B-sides, is Nature of Virtue, Mental Healing Process, Absolute Liberation, and Waiting for the Upturn, Dumb as Death's Head, Leap Into the Wind, 3 Orange Kisses from Kazan, Fruit of the Heart, Soup of Mixed Emotions, and the original of The Sinking Feeling. And Soup of Mixed Emotions and Fruit of the Heart came on a 12-inch, which was shrink wrapped and available free inside the first pressing of the Soul Mining album. And the Soul Mining album is 7 fantastic songs. Or if you have the original CD release, it's 8 fantastic songs. If you have the cassette, it's 8 fantastic songs and 5 okay, pretty good ones. And it's probably best to talk through the Soul Mining cassette now. Has the main version of it. This is the first version that I bought of Soul Mining. There is the cassette copy, because it came with the extra songs that were only available as B-sides. So it features Perfect on there, which is a re-recorded version of the single during the soul mining sessions, alongside Three Orange Kisses from Kazan, The Nature of Virtue, Mental Healing Process, Waiting for the Upturn, and Fruit of the Heart. So it didn't have Super Mixed Emotions, didn't have Leave It to the Wind or Absolute Liberation or Dumb as Death's Head, but it had probably half of the album. So if you wanted to hear these mystical songs from this lost other album that never came out, I'm afraid you had to buy the cassette with its bizarrely yellow leader tape. And normally I'm used to the leader tape on cassettes being like orange or red or something, but no, this version was yellow. So that was the first version that I bought with my limited pocket money for about £3. I think I bought it from Second City Sounds, which is now probably a shisha bar in Birmingham. And the dominant format at the time that the album was released was obviously the LP. And as I've said before, the LP came in two configurations. This is the more popular, better known version. The other version with that 3-song 12-inch, I've not ever been able to track a copy of it down, and that features 2 songs: Fruit of the Heart, which is on the Soul Mining cassette, and Soup of Mixed Emotions, which is the only the song I don't have an officially released physical copy of anywhere. But since it costs 70 quid to buy it on Discogs and it is one song and I've downloaded the song for free, I'm not going to lose any sleep about that. Although 70 quid for it is still less than half the tickets for the Royal Albert Hall show in 2018. So yeah, there you go. Not that I'm bitter about the cost of that gig. Soul Mining then is the album that I think CBS thought they were going to get when they signed Matt Johnson. Although they signed him, and obviously he recorded and wrote Pornography of Despair, and over time his life changed, and Soul Mining is the album that was effectively Pornography of Despair replaced. He wrote new songs and only kept the sinking feeling from it. Everything else kind of slid to one side. And all the other songs were re-recorded in the same sessions but used as B-sides, hence all those lovely B-sides and 12 inches that I've shown you a few minutes ago. As is often the case, is that you start doing one thing and then your life changes and you realise that what you had started doing no longer fits the life that you have or the circumstances that you've got. So, for example, in 1995, I was writing a novel, and one of the plot lines that was in there was around the death of somebody's mother, and then my mum died. And then I realised I'd been overtaken by events. I couldn't do this. I couldn't present this. I couldn't write this. I couldn't finish it. And very possibly with Soul Mining, what happened is that life moved on. Matt became more confident in his production. He had a new relationship. He became more confident in his songwriting. His songwriting leapt up in accessibility. They still had verses, choruses, bridges, and all that, but the songwriting had moved away from being abstract explorations of things and moved on from being less accessible. Because, make no mistake about it, Absolute Liberation is a really good B-side, but it's a bad album track. It was very much steeped in the same kind of musical configuration and ideas that you would have had in Burning Blue Soul, that same kind of heavy, psychedelic, almost broken version of reality. Soul Mining was from the heart. And Soul Mining was more direct, it was more accessible, it was more melodic, it was more approachable. It was a better set of songs than Pornography of Despair. Pornography of Despair is the missing link between Burning Blue Soul and Soul Mining. Soul Mining is the first album of Matt Johnson as a mature songwriter, even though he's only at the age of 23. And the songs that he wrote made the other songs obsolete. They no longer fit. They weren't appropriate. They just weren't the right ones, and so Pornography of Despair became kind of relegated to B-side status, and you can piece it together through the track listing, which I will post in the comments down there. Well, instead, with Soul Mining, what you got was a very, very confident debut album that betrayed none of the hesitancy of the Burning Blue Soul or Pornography of Despair period. Confident songwriting, it's assured arrangements, they're not flabby. Everything that's there is there for a reason. It doesn't outstay its welcome, and it hangs together in the way that a truly, truly great album does, is that every song feels like the natural continuation of the song before it. and the song and the song that follows it is it's a perfect place where it's one of the best sequenced albums of all time. There is one change I would make, but I'll get to that later on. And it opens with "I've been waiting for tomorrow all of my life," the song that appeared in a longer extended form on the B-side of the "This Is the Day" 12-inch. And the "I've been waiting for tomorrow all of my life," by the way, if you listen to it, the countdown goes from 8 to 1 but misses 7, which is strange, but there you are. And it's a very adolescent album, Soul Mining. The lyrics are very, very much written from the point of, and this is perhaps why I really connected to it when I was 14, 15 years old. These songs are written from the point of view of an idealistic teenager who has yet to experience things in life that they were hoping for. There's a strong sense of, I think, there's a strong sense of political kind of, not preachifying, leave that for Bono, but a strong sense of a political orientation in the album that seeps through all of it. And some of the lyrics are really, really dark. The line in Perfect about an old man fingering his perishing flesh, telling himself he was a good man and he did good things while he takes a sip from his bottle of distilled damnation, for example. That's very wordy, but at the same point, it's very kind of dark and gritty, and there's a bit of an underbelly into that I don't necessarily enjoy. I've been waiting for tomorrow all of my life. Has a line about what is it now? Where is it? Filled with useless information, spewed out by papers and radio stations, and hounded by fair weather friends, sowing the seeds for my discontent. And those fair weather friends were the people that, when he got the 80,000 advance from CBS, were probably like, "Where's my share? What are you going to do for me? I only like you because you're rich." That type of thing, which does happen on occasion. And then, of course, we've got "This Is the Day," one of the token signature the songs. Which, by the way, "This Is the Day" features an omnichord, which is considerably cheaper than a synclavier. There's cause of an argument in the production, and so the production was originally going to be Mike Thorne, who did some of those B-sides, did the original version of "Uncertain Smile," the original version of "Perfect," for example, and it moved over into production by Paul Hardiman and Matt Johnson, and became very much more confident. Is that now Matt Johnson was a musician who had a very clear understanding of the vision and what he wanted to achieve and what he wanted the music to sound like, and he was going to achieve that. And so his producer, he didn't need somebody that was going to mold his vision. He knew what he wanted to achieve. What he wanted was somebody that was more of a technician or an engineer who was there to service his vision as opposed to shape it. That cliche from Michelangelo is to say, "Well, how did you cut the..." Well, not Michelangelo, but when you cut the statue, how did you do it? I said, "Well, I just cut off all the bits that didn't look like him." What Matt Johnson did when he produced his album is he just took out all of the sounds that didn't sound like soul mining, which, when you put it that way, sounds ridiculously easy. But as we know, and Eddie Van Halen didn't know, although he did later on in his career, is the notes you leave out are as important as the notes that you leave in, which is a bastardization of a quote from Mark Hollis of Talk Talk. But still, there you are. "This Is the Day" is a surprisingly mature song about somebody looking back over their life as an older person and saying, well, it's never too late. You can change who you are. Obviously, you can't change the past. You can't go backwards. If I could go backwards, heck, there's loads of things I'd change about my life. There's years I'd wipe out. There's people I'd never meet. There's relationships that I would remove from my entire lived experience because they brought nothing positive to me. But you can't live like that. You can only live in the way that's going forward. And so "This Is the Day" is a pivotal song about change and regret and everything that goes with it. The idea the calendar in your wall is ticking the days off. You've been reading some old letters. You smile and think how much you've changed. All the money in the world couldn't buy back those days. And if you could go back, would you even want to? Is kind of like the thing. Now there's a wonderful kind of line in there, which "You could have done anything if you wanted," which always reminded me of a quote that Sid Barrett's housemate said about him, which was that the reason he did so little was not because of that he had nothing to do. It's just as soon as he did something, he closed off all the other possibilities that he could have been doing. The moment you make a decision to go there, you immediately make the decision to not go anywhere else but there for example. And that's possibly one of the things which was going through the album, is that idea of possibility and a sense that things could change. Track 3, The Sinking Feeling, which we've seen on the 12-inch already, is around, again, an idea of you can't destroy your problems by destroying yourself. Death is not the answer, for your soul may burn in hell. Well, come on, that's very obviously talking about teenage suicide there. And then we've got Uncertain Smile. Now, the difference with Uncertain Smile is, although it is re-recorded in some parts, the clarinet solo is replaced by Jules Holland's piano solo. And Jules Holland's piano solo on this, by the way, is very typically Jules Holland, which is why use one note when 14,000 can do. But also the other thing is Jules Holland wrote, or he played 2 piano solos with the idea that they would break up the song at various points. And when he listened to the final mix of the track, he was really surprised, because what Matt Johnson did is actually he put those 2 solos together and created like a 4 or 5 minute coda of this incredible piano solo, which I can remember right now. And if I were able to play a piano, that would be one of my show-off piano solos. But I can't. I can barely play, just can't get enough, which still makes me a better keyboard player than Andrew Fletcher. And then we go over to side 2. Side 2 opens with The Twilight Hour, about lying on the bed, watching shadows on the wall. And it's about, again, a lot of navel gazing, a lot of contemplation, a lot of thought about who am I, what am I going to do. This is an album that when you read the lyrics, they're designed to be sat on a bedroom, on your bed, living in your parents' house, wondering about who am I going to be when I grow up. Why is life this way? It's so unfair. That's the central emotional temperature that sits at the bottom of soul mining. It's mining your soul and going, what is going on? Who am I? What do I believe? What do I want to do when I grow up? Do I want to grow up? Am I just going to have to pretend to be a grown-up like all the other grown-ups and then surround myself by more grown-ups? All that type of stuff. And it's very good. Yeah, I can't really talk about it in any way more than that. But also, there's the other thing about the lyric in The Twilight Hour is it's about a dependence upon a relationship as being the source of salvation, about relying on her as a object of salvation, the thing which is, if I have the relationship, everything else falls into place, and it's not quite like that at all. 2 more tracks to go on the LP. Soul Mining. There's an LP mix of Soul Mining. There is, of course, the 12-inch mix of Soul Mining. And I've got to tell you, the 12-inch mix of Soul Mining is easily the best mix of the track. It's enormous. It's gorgeous. It's 6.5 minutes. It's the definitive version of the song. And the LP version, which is also, of course, on the 7-inch here of Uncertain Smile, is fine, but it's an edit, and it feels like an edit. It feels like a half-realised painting, a sketch compared to the full 12-inch mix. If you really want to get the 12-inch mix on CD, I'm afraid you do have to get the Sweet Bird of Truth CD single from 1986. This is difficult to get, and it's expensive. It's not even on the 45 RPM compilation album, which has a specific disc of 12-inch remixes, because it's not a 12-inch remix, even though it's a remix that was on the A side of a 12-inch, because it wasn't released as a single in its own right. It was only released shrink-wrapped to one of the Infected era singles. Complicated? I'll draw you a map. But the Soul Mining title track really kind of lays it all out. It's about floating down a tunnel in a little wooden box. You're scared and you're lonely and you're enclosed with fog. Something always goes wrong when things are going to right. And it's so adolescent. But at the same point, when you're that age, and I was that age once, despite what you might think, there is the sense of, things are going too well. Something's going to come along. Here it is, the fucking the thing that's going to make everything bad. It goes into that, and it's a song about you've been read like an open book, page by page. You'll never tell anyone your inner thoughts again. And a huge amount of the lyrics on Soul Mining are around probably having your heart broken for the first time, about being throwing everything into your first relationship, and then your first relationship not really working, and you don't necessarily have the tools in your emotional toolbox to be able to deal with that. You know, my first relationship was a dumpster fire of other people. I thought I behaved pretty well in that, but there was there was significant cheating by the other person. And being 17 or 18 when that happens, you're kind of going, it's not me, is it? It's not me. I didn't deserve this. I wouldn't have chosen this. Someone's done this thing to me. And whilst it's not illegal, it's certainly immoral. It's a really difficult period of time. Now, I listened to this album a lot, actually, around about the time of that breakup. I do have a list of my breakups in order of how much they hurt me. Much like the character from High Fidelity, you know, was it the music or the misery that came first? Yes, I've got a list of breakups, and I've got a list of the 10 worst days of my life, and I've ranked them in order by how terrible they are, because of course I have, and I'm sure other people have as well, and they just don't want to admit to it. And then the last track on the album is Giant. Giant is monster, and it closed every show on the 1989 and 1990 World Tour. It's this huge, swirling epic of chanting and percussion and lyrics and all around creating almost an otherworldly sense of chanting. Now, I was convinced actually that the wordless vocal refrain at the end of Giant had been sampled off something else, but it hadn't. I thought it'd been sampled off some weird world music LP, like half of the Eno and Burn album. But no, it was created in the studio by Matt Johnson and Zeke Manyika and the other people that were working on it. And by the way, even though the is technically Matt Johnson, there are other musicians. So Zeke Manyika plays drums on most of the album. If he doesn't, then it's Andy Duncan. And we have probably a split between the two. A chap, J.G. Furwell, also recorded as Fetus and scraping Fetus off the wheel and all those other type of things. Used the pseudonym Frank Want on this and plays on a number of tracks on the album. Martin McCurrick from Therapy and Susie and the Banshees plays cello on The Twilight Hour, which just goes to show you how far back this goes. And it was even though it felt like it was a solo album, if you'd listened to Soul Mining, you would have gone, that's a band playing in a studio. And for a period of time, a lineup of musicians was created for each song that played those songs in full. And Giant itself got a 12-inch release in 2014. This is the alternate cover from the American and Canadian versions of the album, by the way. So the cover for the album, which most people know, is a painting by Andy Doug Johnson of one of the jazz musician Fela Kuti's wives smoking a cigarette. This is not what you would put on the cover of an album if you want to sell lots of copies. In America, they chose this as the cover for the album, and the CD edition of the album features that there on the cover. I prefer this as the cover. I think it's better. And the CD version of the album also features a bonus track, a re-recording of Perfect that was done during the album sessions that Matt Johnson chose not to use, apart from as the limited edition 12-inch there, because he thought the song Perfect was too good to let go, but he didn't like the recording on the single, so he redid it during the album sessions, but it didn't fit on the album, which I disagree with, because I think if you use a 12-inch mix of Soul Mining, then put the re-recording of Perfect and then Giant, the album would flow better, with the album kind of dissipating into a nothingness at the end of Giant, which is about 9 minutes long, and it's a banger. I gotta tell you, it's an absolutely glorious track. The CD booklet, by the way, only has 2 pages. If you go for the American version, which is just that, if you go for the UK version, it's got lyrics and all that type of stuff. So blown up panels, which you'll see on the inner sleeve to the LP. But no, Giant got a 12-inch release in 2014 on the A side. This by the way was timed to coincide with the reissue of the Soul Mining album. On the A side was the LP version of Giant, and on the B side was the DJ Food version. So DJ Food re-recorded or recorded a version of Giant for his album, The Search Engine, which was published on Ninja Tune in 2011, and Matt Johnson re-recorded the vocals to go with it. So effectively, it's a new The track, a re-recording of Giant from 2011. And if you can find this 12-inch, do get it. And if you can find the Ninja Tune album, Search Engine by DJ Food, do get it. DJ Food interviewed Matt Johnson on stage at Rough Trade East in 2014. I was there alongside my friend Mark, which, considering that we'd started 25 years earlier listening to the in his bedroom and going, my God, this band's brilliant. The idea that we'd still be there 25 years later just blows my tiny, fragile, eggshell mind. That is Soul Mining by The. I think it's an incredible album, and I recommend it strongly to anybody that's ever been 14 or 17. It's aged, certainly. It's a product of its time. It's 40 years old next year. I can't believe it's that old, but it's an album that I listened to, and I first heard it when I was about 15 or 16, and it was as if somebody had suddenly taken all the thoughts that were flying around my head and turned them into music, and damn good music at that. Ever since then, I have been a The fan, and I probably will be for the rest of my life. It's a brilliant album. It's in a list, many people's list of the top 500 albums of all time, and deservedly so. It is a classic, and it's an album that it didn't change my life, but it changed me, and that's near enough the same thing. It made me feel a lot less alone when I was a teenager in my bedroom, thinking only Robert Smith understands me. It wasn't just Robert Smith, it was Matt Johnson as well, and other musicians whose names I have not yet mentioned. Soul Mining, absolute classic. If you don't know it, give it a listen. You might love it. If you don't, that's fine. There's always new albums coming out, and they're always going to be brilliant. So take care of yourselves and each other. I will hopefully see you all soon. Stay beautiful, like and subscribe, and see you later. Bye.